Good afternoon. We want to welcome you to another episode of You and the Law Podcast Show. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show, Virgil Green, and as always, I got to introduce the brother who is going to look like Samuel L. Jackson tonight, from the Shaft movie. But he
Okay.
goes by the name. Of Steve Swaggy One, the ultimate, the ultimate beast.
No, Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson. Wish he looked like this.
No, you wish you looked like Samuel L. Jackson. That's what it is, brother.
I wish I looked like his bank account.
Don't we both?
Yeah.
Don't we both? And how you doing tonight, brother?
My brother, I'm doing good, man. Before we get started, I want to say a prayer for the family of Officer Cooper Dawson, who was Greenville, Texas police officer who was killed in the line of duty 2 nights, I think 2 or 3 nights before Thanksgiving. And so they had his funeral services yesterday. So I want to pray for his prayer out to his family and to the men and women of the Greenville, Texas Police Department and to the city of Greenville, Texas.
Yeah, yeah, man. Keith. It just makes it even much more tragic when it's right before the holidays. But in any time when an officer is killed in the line of duty, uh, holiday or not a holiday, it's just an unfortunate uh, time that his family, the agency, that community is dealing with.
Yeah, it is, man. So shout for prayer for all of our first line responders.
Yeah, 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 man. So you and your family had a good holiday, good Thanksgiving.
We did, man. We ate and had a good time, and so got to see some friends, and so we're good.
But good, man. Well, we're not too many weeks away from Christmas, man. It just seems like you know this year you don't get that full almost month before Christmas, and it's just Thanksgiving and boom, here's Christmas, and then boom, there's New Year's. So yeah, but yeah, hey Keith, man, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, joining us tonight, who are watching and listening on our YouTube, our Facebook, and LinkedIn. Tonight we've got another informative topic we're going to be talking about, which is policing without federal oversight. And somebody on LinkedIn, Keith, tagged uh, Bob, and so we'll see if he is watching it or listening tonight on LinkedIn, and we might end up getting a few comments from Bob Scales, who we've had on the podcast show uh, several times, who is a expert when it comes to police oversight and police consent decrees. And so again, if it Bob, if you're listening, don't be shy to tune in and share your comments and your thoughts about what we're going to be talking about, policing without federal oversight.
Yeah, Virgil, and so I think we have to kind of lay the foundation.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
Keith, I want you to open that up, but I got a video I want to show so some people can kind of understand what we're talking about. No, go ahead.
Okay, well, the thing about it is that we talk about who polices the police, and
Yeah.
so we have on a statewide and local municipality, you have police commissions, and you'll have police oversight or advisory. And then there are those who believe that they have no teeth when it gets to the point of a civil rights violation, or it appears that police departments may have been heavy-handed in situations like that. And
Hmm.
so when you talk about police federal oversight, we're talking about the FBI, Federal Bureau of
Yeah.
Investigation, who handles
DOJ.
DOJ, who handles investigations against law enforcement entities when it comes to civil rights or past practices that
Hmm.
the department may have experienced or may be alleged to have committed. And so, the process is, I believe the process is something that's needed. We're talking about a process that has seen some improvement in police departments when they do go under consent decrees. But as we've had Bob on the show before, one of the things that concerns a lot of police departments is the fact of how this occurs, especially in the selection of the monitors that are that oversee the process of the consent decrees, which basically
Mm-hmm.
these are the areas that this police department needs to improve in. I'm going to oversee this as a monitor for however long it takes to ensure that these past practices have been addressed and policies meet the needs of these past practices so that they will not occur in the future. The concern that a lot of departments, a lot of city governments, and especially Bob has brought up is how effective are they
Yeah.
when it comes down to the person who is monitoring those uh, those consent decrees, and they're making a lot of money that is paid by those cities. So you have monitors, federal monitors that can make up to $1 million or more,
Well, yeah.
monitoring these processes, and you're kind of held at the mercy of these monitors because this can last for years. And
Yeah.
so that's the question I think. And Bob talks, Bob has brought out his concerns is that, okay, we're not saying that there's not a need for this type of action,
Oversight. Yeah.
right? But it depends on, hey, who's monitoring the monitors to ensure that they aren't just doing this because or extending these processes because of, you
The
know,
financial gain.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Keith, and I think, as you just mentioned, Bob has been very critical of the consent decrees in Seattle. And one of the videos that I'm going to show here in a little bit is out of Seattle. But, we found, Seattle, uh, Phoenix, Albuquerque. Um, there's been multiple agencies now. Uh, Minneapolis Police Department has found themselves coming under a consent decree. And so, Keith, and I think, for those who are tuning in and listening, you know, how does agencies get themselves in this position to where there is the DOJ does come in and say there's been past uh, patterns and practices that this agency has done, and they really go in and look at the overall operations of that police department. Uh, and does there need to be some federal oversight?
yeah. Well,
Some, go ahead.
well, no, go ahead, Virgil. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, and I think, for you and I, Keith, we've never been in that position before. But as throughout the podcast, to talk about what, and there's a lot of agencies that have not come under consent decrees. They've had some issues, but does it boil down? Does it come down to the leadership of those agencies to make sure that, number one, their policies are up to date, that officers' training is up to date, that all these standards are there, that if you do have a situation where there's an unfortunate use of force that happens, that you're able to show that you've been through all these steps, and that you are holding yourselves accountable. And so, again, Keith, and I think the public really needs to understand, how does these police departments find themselves coming under a consent decree, being under federal oversight, and the fact that some of these, Keith, will take decades for oversight, such as Seattle.
Yeah, and then you look at the fact of the matter is that are they effective? And I think I think that all rolls back to, yeah, I can give you a roadmap of these are the things that you need to work on,
Hmm.
but are you working on them? Are you making sure that you're adhering to the new policies? Or are you just saying you're going through? And that's why I believe that there has to be some form of oversight. My question is, you know, the cost that cities uh, have to
Or
pay. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars because it's not that once you're under that consent decree, you are ordered to
by the
follow
court.
those by the courts to follow those mandates. That could cost millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Uh, and now that's money that comes from your general fund.
Yeah.
And so, and
That are
then
taxpayer dollars.
the taxpayer dollars, and then you are paying that monitor.
Hmm.
And then if that monitor needs staff, you're going to pay them. So you are absorbing all of that. Now, are there departments out there that has risen to that level? Absolutely.
Yeah.
You look at, for years, New Orleans PD was under one of
The
the
consent.
longest consent decrees, in the history of the United States. But what I
And they're
will,
actually, and Keith, aren't they? Isn't the mayor challenging them coming off of that consent decree? Because I believe several months ago they are challenging the DOJ uh, in that consent decree.
yeah,
And I think because Bob actually brought this up in a podcast that and I think he shared something on LinkedIn where he was, I think he was making some comments that it was good to see New Orleans challenge the DOJ regarding their consent decree.
I believe you're right, and I believe the fact that it had been years.
Hmm.
I want to say maybe decades.
Yeah,
And when I say decades, I don't think past 2 decades. If it
I
is
think,
slightly past that, but I do know that there had been New Orleans has been one of the um, in the past it had a bad reputation, but I
yeah,
do know that there has been some programs that have come out of New Orleans that have been adapted uh, uh, that have been adopted by various departments regarding um, um, duty to intervene and also holding each other accountable. So I do know that there's been some major things come out. I do look at Albuquerque, New Mexico. One of their biggest things was the use of force and the amount of shootings that they had, that deadly force situations that they have had. If you go back and look at them over the last 3 or 4 years, you've seen a decline in the number of excessive force cases, especially when it comes to deaths. So I
hmm,
think there are needs for this type of oversight, but
hmm,
it comes down to the fact of the management and administrative part of it.
yeah,
And at the end of the day, um, you know, I think you do need, the law enforcement does need oversight. And I believe it does go beyond local, state, and county. I do believe there
yeah.
are those times when you continue to have these past practices and what's the other word? I'm looking for past practice and what's the other term that they use? You
Uh,
just said it a few past patterns
yeah, past
of,
pattern. Yeah. Hmm.
excessive force, of civil
Yeah.
rights violations, of deadly force situations, of
Hmm.
um, no knock warrants and things like that. I do think you have to have those investigations to determine if there is a pattern, and so you're not going to get any gripes out of me regarding it. The only thing, like I said, is the concern of what it puts the now. Think about this too, Virgil. So, Memphis today, DOJ had a report on Memphis, and I will tell
Hmm.
you that it's very unfair to the chief because she
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 hasn't been there that
inherited
long.
this. Yeah, she's inherited it. There were some things. The Tyree Nichols situation did
Hmm.
happen under her watch. We know
Yeah.
this, and she's never made any excuses for it. But at the end of the day, the report that came out today, it was scathing.
Hmm.
It was a scathing report that doesn't really it doesn't there are a lot of great officers, amazing officers on that police department that haven't been involved in any of that. But unfortunately, the current police department, any current police department that's involved, and they talk about past patterns, they're going to be all the officers are going to be uh, um, are going to appear to be involved in that, and that's absolutely
Yeah.
false.
Yeah.
But what I'm telling you is that there is a big push for back from police departments now to say, wait a minute, we're just not going to fall on the sword. We've
Mhm.
made these policies. She said today, Chief Davis said today that they, over the last 3 years, they've modified and written and over 700 policies.
Mhm.
And so, those are the things you're looking to see, that you recognize on your own that there was a problem. You're addressing the
Mhm.
problem. And so those are the things that I look at.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Keith, you're right because today, as you just mentioned, and I'm reading it now that Memphis won't sign a police reform agreement with DOJ following the unfortunate death of Tyreek Nichols, and so this is kind of what Bob was talking about, where now cities are not just saying, "Okay, you got us in the hands. This is what we'll do. We'll follow you." On top of that, you've got to restructure your whole budget to uh, to make these changes, and you, like you said, you got to pay this monitor, this federal monitor, who some are retired law enforcement executives, some are lawyers, but they've got more of a financial skin in the game than anything. Now they're not going to say that up front, but if you got a federal monitor keep making $2 million a year, it's going to be kind of hard for you to release that and to put out a good report to say that this agency has met and has exceeded what we've asked them to do. Because I'm gonna go to this video with Seattle. Seattle was under a consent decree for a long time, and if I recall, Bob was involved with that from the beginning when they fell under that consent decree.
Well, Virgil, also when you think about it, and when we say that, I'm gonna put a disclaimer on this. Not every monitor makes what we were saying. They can get up to that. I've heard
Well,
that. I've heard. Well, no, I'm just for the
yeah,
audience's benefit, is that I've heard that number before. That doesn't mean that's automatic, but there is a large salary that does go along with this process, because this person is monitoring, is there on site in that organization or somewhere in the vicinity, whether it's a building next to it or inside the actual building,
yeah,
monitoring to ensure that the changes and modifications are designed to their likings. And that's the
yeah.
key we talked about with Bob. Their likings. You can have everything, but if they don't think that it's that, they
That
monitor
is,
and they say
you're,
start
yeah,
over again. And that's
yeah.
that's the question, that's the
But
concern that people have. There's teeth in it, but at the same time, are the teeth too sharp, to
yeah,
the point that this person has a lot of discretion?
yeah, a lot. And I think, Keith, you just mentioned that the Memphis, they've made hundreds of positive changes since the death of Tyreek Nichols, police reform, policy changes, so many things that they have done. And I'm pretty sure Chief Davis and her staff, they presented all of that to the Department of Justice.
Yeah.
And, and as I'm reading what the mayor said there today is that he didn't rule out eventually agreeing to a consent decree with DOJ, but can the city police themselves and can the city put in some reforms and some practices that will where they can monitor that themselves versus having a federal monitor do that? And I think you're going to see, and I think this is going to, along with what Memphis is doing, what Phoenix is doing, and some other agencies who are in the same situation, Key, everybody's kind of looking to see. who's going to take that step to really challenge DOJ to say, we don't need you, we need you, but we can do this. And I think on the other side of that, you've got some people in the community who are going to, rightfully so, say, Key, well, why didn't you do this before? Why didn't you put yourself in a position before so you didn't find yourself in that situation? I'm pretty sure there were some other, even elected officials would even ask that same question.
But
Why?
but
Go ahead.
Virgil, what people have to understand is that it doesn't mean that police departments are not making changes, positive changes, before and during these investigations. Uh,
Hmm.
what you're going to reveal, I mean, they're going to come out and say, they're going to reveal all this stuff, and the question becomes, okay, so um, if they're doing, why are we not emphasizing on the positive things that they are doing to ensure that? Then why are we emphasizing more on the negative things that you found in the past that they have? Now their policies have changed and things like that. So I think that's also another concern that people have is that, okay, the way this report reads is that there's been nothing done, because what you saw today was the mayor and the police chief that actually had to come out and say, hey, we've had these 700 policy changes, over the last 3 years. We've done this, because in that report in that initial press conference from DOJ, that did not come
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
So it does make the community think that, well, you're being pushed to do this. No, I mean, there's a process, and knowing Chief Davis, there's been a process in changing. What happened was the tragedy of Tyree Nichols didn't help the Memphis police department, didn't help their case, and so that is when the department came in, DOJ came in, and then they found these other past patterns and practices. But that doesn't mean, I want to make sure that everybody understands, that does not mean that changes were not taking place prior to any situation. It's just the fact that the investigation, you weren't told that today in the press conference.
Yeah. Well, Keith, and not to get the politics in the middle of this, but there's also this conversation out there that under the previous administration, a lot of the Department of Justice did not do any consent decrees, and there is some talk that that will probably be the same way that in some agencies, some people are thinking, well, hold out because when this other administration comes in, that they won't enforce those consent decrees. And I think, again, there needs to be some federal oversight if there is a definite evidence that shows that there has been a consistent practice and pattern of use of force that has resulted in death and some other things that are looked at. Because again, we've seen where some agencies don't really police themselves, and there needs to be some. And now you've got some cities, Keith, who have put in community oversight boards or commissions uh, that may have a little teeth in the game, but uh, they don't really have the authority unless their government officials have given them that authority to make some serious
But,
recommendation.
but Virgil, let me say this, and I've said this before. I disagree that we always have to wait on federal agencies, DOJ, to come in and do oversight. It is needed in times, but I will tell you that the community is the strongest oversight that any police department or any city government can have. And I'm a big proponent of putting your policies online.
Hmm.
I'm a big proponent of having an advisory or oversight on whomever, that on a regular basis, whether it's biweekly, whether it's monthly, whether it's quarterly, sit down with the chief and go over the policies and go over the number of statistics that when we talk about use of force and when we talk about cases involving racial profiling, and each month give a report. I have this report put on online where people can say, well, over the last 3 months, we had this many excessive force uh, complaints. And out of these, we had 50, and out of 50, 3 were confirmed. Now, one sustained is too many. One is too many.
Yeah.
But we had 50, we had 2. This time last year we had 20, and we had 50, and we had 10 sustained. So you look at to see if that stuff is trending up. I think what happens is we don't have enough, the communities don't have enough knowledge or not provided information on how to ask questions related to what their police department is doing. I've said that over and over again. You don't need certain type of oversight or advisory when you have a community that's paying taxes, and they need to be more involved in what is your police department doing? What type of training? That right there in itself, that's where it starts.
Yeah.
I'm a strong believer in that.
Yeah. Well, you're right, Keith. Hey, Keith, I want to remind those who are just now tuning into the podcast that tonight's topic is policing federal oversight into police departments. If you got any comments or any questions regarding the topic that we're talking about, policing without federal oversight versus policing with federal oversight, please put those comments in the chat. But Keith, I want to play this video that's out of Seattle and how Seattle found themselves under a consent decree. And this video is probably a couple of years old, but it lays the foundation of what got them into this consent decree.
Okay.
David, city leaders say this is a huge step forward for the department, but I spoke to some people today who tell me they will always have concerns when it comes to police.
With every flick of his wrist, Eagle's son carves a mark into 8 generations of tradition.
I love what I do. I started picking up this at 4 years old, 29 now.
He says it creates a spiritual connection, especially to his late uncle, John T. Williams, killed right where these wood shavings fall.
It's my first time being here in a long time. It's not okay what the officer did. If there is forgiveness somewhere, it's just not with me.
In 2010, Eagle's son's uncle crossed Howell Street and Boren Avenue, carrying a board and a small knife. The Seattle police officer shot and killed Williams after asking him to put the knife down. A review board determined the shooting unjustified.
Took history away.
Soon after the incident, the U.S. Department of Justice ruled the Seattle Police Department would be overseen by the federal government due to its excessive use of force, mishandling of people in crisis, and lack of de-escalation. More than 10 years later, a federal judge ruled there's enough change in the department to remove most of the oversight. Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell calling the ruling a critical milestone in the city's efforts of police reform. According to data I obtained from the Seattle Office of Police Accountability, there was a 50% drop in complaints and cases from 2019 to 2022. But Seattle isn't entirely in the clear. The court identified several areas still needing to be addressed, including use of force in crowd management. This comes after the department's violent and criticized response to protests in 2020. While city leaders say there will only be continued improvement, families who face tragedy will always hold on to the pain.
It's hard walking that peaceful road without showing any kind of anger.
The other areas that federal oversight will remain is with the police union negotiations, as well as the current systems that are in place for accountability. For more information on this ruling, go to fox13seattle.com. Reporting live in Seattle, I'm AJ Janabel.
Keith, and obviously now there's which is good for Seattle, is that there's some of this oversight by DOJ is being removed, not all of it. But Keith, it kind of goes back to the culture of policing, something that I have talked a lot about on the podcast. The culture of policing has to change, but the culture of policing hasn't changed. And you have agencies like Seattle, New Orleans, Minneapolis, and all these agencies that have internally known that they've had a history of officers having complaints and a history of use of force incidents, but small things were done to kind of quieten things down, but those things still existed, and you find yourself back in the same situations. And like in Minneapolis, Keith, which is rare, that there would be a state and a federal oversight into the Minneapolis Police Department if that happens in 2025. But again, Keith, I don't know if you can speak on just how does an agency find themselves in these situations when they know that there are some internal things that they need to correct?
And then comes to the culture. In being a chief of a department that had that strong culture of me, 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 I'm take care of my friends, and we are above the law and whatever it takes to stop crime. I think that is the key, and that's why you see a lot of departments that they go outside now of getting to locate police chiefs because they want that change, someone in to come in and change that culture. Because look at it, man. If you've been doing a certain thing for so long, right? You don't you don't care if you're doing it wrong, or you really and truly do not believe you're doing anything wrong, because to you it's effective. And if no one's holding you accountable or nobody's saying anything, and think about this too, Virgil. When you get a complaint from someone, it's a suspect,
Mm-hmm.
and depending on what that suspect is charged with, there is in the police culture, there is a how do you say it? There is potential for that person's credibility not to be at a high level. So basically, it comes down to, well, why should we believe you? She's a prostitute, or he's a prostitute, or he's a drug dealer, or he's a thief. Why should we believe him? This officer was just doing their job. So when you have that type of mindset or that type of culture, and you believe that it takes a heavy hand to be effective in law enforcement, that's how it happens. It becomes a culture. It becomes practice. It becomes accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times you have people who hold the police department accountable, and I'm talking about local government officials who say, I don't want to know, as long as the crime is down and as long as we don't have that criminal element, I don't want to know how it's done.
Yeah.
And so that's how it happens. I think it gets to that point of nobody's doing anything about it.
Yeah.
And it's like I've told you before, we talk about body cameras and stuff. That's what we've seen in a lot of the communities of color, where when you have situations, case in point, like Tyre
Nichols, yeah.
And you have citizens of color who have said, this police department is abusive, this police department is violates people's civil rights, this police department does this, and it doesn't seem to change. The behavior doesn't seem to change.
Yeah.
Then what makes the community so angry is that you see what happened to Tyre on video, and what did they say? The community said, we've been telling you. You haven't done anything. We've told you for years this is occurring, and you haven't done anything. And because you haven't done anything, it's risen to the level of someone losing their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Keith,
that's how this happens.
Yeah. And Keith, as you just mentioned what took place in Memphis, Same thing took place in Minneapolis with George Floyd. That officer, there was a clear history that was uncovered that he had multiple complaints over his career. Nothing had been done. You had people in Minneapolis saying, hey, this police department is very heavy handed. They violate people's rights. Then George Floyd happens, DOJ comes in, and you look at all of the things that has previously occurred, and all these things are uncovered. You cannot fault, and I think this is one of the things that we can agree to disagree with Bob. I think you cannot fault having DOJ come in and say we are here to make sure that people's rights are protected because you're not doing that. If you were doing that, we would not be here. And I think that's where people need to start looking at that. When you come into an agency, you want to look at that whole overall operations. What is the past business of this department? What will I be inheriting? Because you're going to inherit some things that you're going to have to take responsibility for, even though you were not there. And so I think again, just deep rooted cultural practices in some of these major cities have found themselves there. And like you said, Keith, the people who look like you and I have been screaming for years about the excessive use of force. Uh, and I even recall even in Oklahoma City, same thing happened. The community kept saying it, but now you've got agencies who say, okay, we need to put some things in place. We're going to bring the community in. But I think when you bring the community in, now you are really starting to show the community that you are real serious about police reform.
Is and Pam asked, how does a consent decree affect the power of the FOP? Well,
FOPs.
At the end of the day, you are bound by that consent decree. That is a federal court order.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you still have your what I think what people don't understand. The FOP basically deals with the benefit part of it for the organization. It doesn't
the bargaining rights of the officer.
So for benefits, salaries, certain levels of discipline, promotions, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they would not have any say so over any say so over the consent decree. But now, whatever changes and stuff are made, that could affect the negotiation part on the end. But at the end of the day, they have no power over the consent decree. They have none. They can say all day that they disagree, but they have no power. And I think they take that in mind because as you heard on the Seattle situation at the consent decree, they had dismissed part of the consent decree, but the other part of the consent decree was to work with the union.
Yeah.
And so don't know to what extent they worked, but it doesn't. The consent decree deals with policies and what rights management have. They look at that. They look at the past practices of every policy and everything. And FOP does not make policy. The unions do not make policy.
No, they can put up some challenges to some things that agencies want to implement, such as, Keith, I mean, there's been the unions that came out against body worn cameras. They came out against other some reforms.
Well,
That
let me say this. For the most part, the large majority of the police departments have accepted body worn cameras. The concern they've had is
how that's being monitored.
How they're being monitored, as far as the auditing of the footage. The other part is, will their members, if they're involved in a certain situation, would they be allowed to review that video before they actually wrote their report or spoke with their supervisors? Those have been some of the major concerns that I've seen. I haven't really seen anyone say they didn't want body cameras. it was the basically the auditing part of it, and the part where officers be allowed to utilize it before review that footage before they did any type of interview with internal affairs or did any type of interview with a criminal investigator that was may have been involved in a that may be investigating a use of force situation. Those were the main issues.
Yeah. Well, and Keith, you're right. And I think, one of the things that, because the union puts themselves in a situation, obviously, to protect the rights of officers. But as we've seen, unions have went a little bit to the extreme. And when you see something, it's hard to ignore what you've seen. But you've seen unions who have stood by officers who clearly there was, uh, you know, excessive use of force. Clearly, this officer violated somebody's rights, but the union uh, does not always see it that way. And we can go back to what happened several months ago with Sonia Massey, where first, the union came out and was in support of that deputy, but later changed within 24 to 48 hours. They changed their tone on that because of most likely seeing what we all saw.
I think a lot of times what you've seen is there are those times when there's jump to conclusion moments based on what they haven't seen, just based on what they've heard. There have been some that have doubled down on it and said, we still believe our the officer didn't do anything wrong. And then some will say, hey, at this point, we have no further, until the investigation is over. So you're not going to please everybody. But I will tell you, man, it is very difficult as a chief, making those. It's not. I'm not making the decision, but you're going to gather some heat, and people have to realize you're going to gather some heat from inside. You're going to gather some heat externally, and that's why I tell chiefs you have to do the right thing. You can never go wrong. You can never go wrong with following policy. And if that employee has clearly violated policy, and where there is no, where there's well, it could have gone this way. No, this is exactly what happened. You're going to be okay. Where you get in trouble is you start trying to please everyone, and you're
trying to please
everyone. This is not an easy job, and I think that's what happens sometimes with chiefs, Virgil. I think that they turn. I can tell you the one department that you just had chiefs that would not make decisions. You had chiefs that wanted to. They didn't want. They didn't want to upset internal because they wanted everybody to like them. But you're not hired. And you do have to change culture. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, you're right, Keith. You got to change the culture of these police departments, especially an outsider coming in. And I'm going to bring this up. How do you change the culture of a police department when you come up through the ranks and you've seen some of these same patterns and you've seen some of these same incidents, but now you are in that position that you probably never thought you would find yourself in, and you know that the culture of that agency needs to change, but it is so embedded. How can somebody who come up through the ranks tackle that?
So the question becomes, what did you do? Were you part of that culture, or what did you do, or did you maintain?
Or did you turn a blind eye to it?
Were you part of it? Did you turn a blind eye to it, or have you maintained your integrity and you've done the right thing while you were there? Those are the things, because I've always told people that, young and aspiring chiefs, that you have to remember everything that you do. People are going to remember. So is the higher you go in an organization, the longer a person's memory becomes of the things that you've done that you're getting ready to discipline them for.
Exactly, Keith. Because they're going to sit there and say, "Well, whoa, wait a second. We went through the academy together.
We're keeping score." And so
Yeah.
it comes down to the point, or you do your job. It comes down to your integrity. It comes down to why I'm here to do the job. I do believe internal candidates can be effective, but I do believe that there are those that don't realize the magnitude of the job that they're taking, because they actually believe. I'll give you a perfect example. I sit on an interview board for a fire chief,
Hmm.
and the culture of this organization was it was a good old boy system that focused specifically on male firefighters. It had a history of discrimination against the few minorities that had ever been hired.
Hmm.
Had one female firefighter, made it very uncomfortable for her. So it was very, very, I mean, it's known fact. This was a person that was going up through the ranks and basically said that he had an amazing relationship with the union and that he had talked to the union off the record, and they were working on some things. Well, that's number one.
Hmm.
You can't have those type of
That,
conversations with you. You can't do that.
yeah.
And for
Especially, yeah.
for any chief, any prospective chiefs that think that, well, they're my friends, do that, absolutely not. You're not going to be best friends with any bargaining unit. You can have a cordial
Well,
relationship, a professional relationship, but you cannot have these coffee, early morning coffee conferences, off the record, these late night discussions and things like that. You just can't have that and thinking that everything's okay, because you have to understand they're not your friend.
yeah.
And so you have individuals who fall for that or believe it. And I told in my overview of this person, said that he's going in with a strike against him because he already thinks that he's got this amazing relationship, this tight bond with the
Hmm.
union, and he feels like they're never going to question anything he does, and that he's going to always be okay with them. And you can't do that.
Well, and Keith, obviously he felt that he had the upper hand on whoever else was being interviewed for that position, but at the same time, we knew that he had the support of that union
Yeah.
to that would influence that decision on who would be the next chief. And I think that's how there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of deals that are being made, and people say, well, if we get you in this position, we're gonna take care of you. And yeah, if I get in this position, I'm gonna take care of you,
Well,
and because you got to remember, if you're coming up through the ranks, you've been a part of that union. But when you get to that rank, you're not a part of the union anymore. You're not on paper on part of the union, but
they don't
you're,
represent you officially,
but
but
you know, you got a very, very close relationship with that membership and with that union, because the union is the people that you work with over your year.
so and it's very difficult. Nobody wants to make change. No, nobody as a profession, we don't like change, uh,
No.
and we are the worst adapters to change. We
Hmm.
don't think change is needed. It comes down to, I know this 21st century policing and community oriented policing was very difficult. You had officers doing that informally, but it was very difficult for some. And there were chiefs that believed that this was a touchy feely,
Yeah.
philosophy.
Yeah.
And so when you have that, that's why I say the chief sets the tone, and it is very difficult. It basically, when a consent decree has been established, things have gotten out of control. It's very
Yeah.
difficult to reel that back in. It's gotten out of control. So not one situation, one incident is going to um, raise the concern of the DOJ. The
Hmm.
DOJ would prefer local agencies to handle that.
Yeah.
But there are times when it's not being handled. And so you can't violate a person's civil rights. Okay. You can't, and that means um, you can't beat people. You can't not provide people with the opportunity, and it doesn't matter what they've done. You cannot prevent them or prohibit them from having legal representation or forcing a confession out of them. You can't do that. And so you would think in 2024, going into 2025, these things are things of the past. Virgil, you would always also think that body cameras have, would have a significant effect on the reduction. I believe we have seen a reduction, but I do also believe that we've seen a lot of things that I think people have forgotten they were wearing body cameras.
Yeah.
And they because think of some of the stuff you've seen. I mean, let's look at Tyree Nichols' case. They had body cameras. Not only do they have body cameras, there are thousands of cameras around the city.
Around the city.
It comes down to the emotional part of it. And so
Yeah.
if your officers' emotional intelligence has to be strong through the entire organization. If it's not strong through the entire organization, that's how you get these cultures that lead to this type of DOJ oversight.
Well, Keith, I want to just remind those who are just now tuning into the podcast that tonight's topic is policing without federal oversight versus policing um, with federal oversight. Those who find themselves under oversight and those who have never been under any kind of federal oversight. Um, if you have any comments, questions, put them in the chat. We'd love to hear more comments and questions from you regarding this, because again, I just think the public needs to be a little bit more educated and informed. What are consent decrees? How does agencies find themselves coming under federal oversight, and how long that federal oversight will be? Keith, there are roughly over approximately 18,000 police departments across the United States.
Well, law enforcement agencies, which
Well,
include county, state.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What I found interesting, Keith, is that roughly 800, less than 1,000 of those departments are accredited. And when you think about, you work for an agency that I believe was an accredited agency in Norman. Was it state accredited? Was it national or state?
Norman was state accredited and Little Rock was nationally accredited.
National accredited. That is when you put yourself in that position, you've reached some milestones to establish, obviously, a lot of things surrounding policy and how your agency operates. It's not, this isn't something that's just given to those agencies, but but that's interesting, Keith, to see that roughly 838 out of 18,000 are accredited. What, why do you think there's so few agencies who are nationally accredited?
So there's no industry standard that says a police department has to be accredited.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, there are two levels of accreditation. There is a national accreditation, CALIA, and then now each state, the majority of the states have a state accreditation that is facilitated by the state chiefs association. It is very expensive. It is very, very expensive to become.
I'm gonna say on the national accreditation is, but the state is not so much.
So it's a commitment, because you have to have full-time people who can run those programs.
Accreditation, yeah.
Because policies are changing, federal, state laws are changing. That's going to affect your policies. You have to have certain type of infrastructure. There's meetings and things that you have to go to, community meetings and things like that. It's very, very time intensive. And so you have agencies. So 80% of the police agencies in the nation are 10 officers or less.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, they may not have the money. So we know CALEA, the national, is expensive. So now they have the state agencies, but that still might not be within the budget of that organization. So I think it comes down to cost, it comes down to logistics, it comes down to staffing, and it comes down to what is this a benefit? Does this benefit our organization? Do we need this industry standard in our organization? So I think it's not just one thing, Virgil. I think it's multiple things. And I get it. There are just some departments that just can't afford it. There's some, because I'm telling you, if you're going to do it right, you're going to have, depending on the size of your organization, you're going to have multiple people focusing just specifically on the accreditation and the policy aspect of it.
Well, and Keith, and I think,
the other thing is when you start talking about, accreditation, right? You're even talking about having certain logistics when it comes to your property room or your crime lab, or your the infrastructure. So a lot of it's just not, people can't afford it.
Yeah. Keith, we got a comment in the chat from Brent on LinkedIn who says, because of the thin blue line, our agencies need to have multiple avenues to report bad officers where the reporting person can stay unknown. And then he has another comment where he says this would be a problem in small town America. You're right, Brent, because in small town America, everybody knows everybody, and there's not that doesn't give a person the ability to be for the agency not to come out to find out who that person is.
But I will tell you that the majority of the mid-sized to large agencies do have a part of their policy that talks about anonymous complaints. That anonymous complaints will be accepted and investigated.
Well, Keith, and I think and what Brent is talking about, and being in a small town, it is difficult if you want to file a complaint against an officer.
Oh yeah. I got you.
Man, as soon as you walk in the door and you say you want to file a complaint, everybody outside of that department is going to know that you were inside of that department filing a complaint. And so I think that prohibits a lot of people, especially in small rural town America, to say, hey, I've got a complaint I want to file, because they may not have the staffing or the personnel in place to fully investigate those type of complaints. And the chief may not even take it serious, or maybe even the sheriff may not even take it serious.
Well, Brent and Virgil, and to the other listeners, just for that reason, Richard Pennington removed internal affairs from the headquarters of New Orleans Police Department and put it in a secluded area for that reason. So that there would be some anonymity, people could remain anonymous. That there wasn't that fear of retaliation. And so absolutely it does occur. So I think that the thing that really surprises your average citizen is the foundation the purpose of law enforcement when it comes down to protecting and serving. And when you talk about protecting and serving, when the average citizen sees incidents that have occurred and it involves policing, I think that's what shocks the conscience of people, the fact that those individuals who have been sworn or have sworn to protect those who are not in a position to protect themselves are involved in the excessive force up to the death of individuals. I think that's what shocks a person's conscience when they see that. And we have to understand that just based on the fact of the authority that we have and to take someone's freedom, to go into someone's home, and to, God forbid, have to take someone's life. Those are very, very strong freedoms, or not freedoms, but very uh, actions that not very many people have. We can't take advantage of that. When we take advantage of that and we have that culture of that, that's when we put in a place where we have to have someone who oversees us when we're not trying to change the way that we do work. And we
the way we
currently do
conduct.
work. Yeah, we haven't tried to change it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's the thing.
yeah. And Keith, it goes back to what one of our faithful listeners has said on the podcast is that it's how we look at people. We don't look at our citizens as our customers. There's not that customer base in policing. It is more the authority, the enforcement side of it. And we all go to restaurants, wherever we spend our money at. If we don't get service, we're not going to go back. But our citizens don't have that luxury to say, hey, I didn't get good service from you, so I don't want you back. Because if they need the police, you may not be the same police officer who shows up. It's going to be somebody else, but will they get better service out of that next police officer?
Well, what people are starting to do, Virgil, is they're not calling us back. So they're either going to take actions in their own hands, or they're going to be victims who feel as though nothing is going to be done
Correct.
because they've had that bad experience, that one bad experience.
Yeah.
You've got 85 to 90% of the nation, or of a community over the nation, that will never come in contact. Well, will never come in contact with a police officer, or will come in contact with a police officer one time, and that one time is going to dictate the perception of or reality
Yeah.
that citizen has regarding law enforcement.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it right, we've lost that citizen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Keith, and I think, the positions that we hold are very important.
They are.
We've stated that we set the tone. Uh, you cannot shy away. You cannot, and I'll say this, and I think you got to be able to accept the responsibility of what happens within your department. And some people will say, that's a little bit too much. You can't control everything, but how do you, and again, you got to surround yourself with people who have the same values that you have. And if those individuals don't have those same values, you got to put people in position that do. Because when something is brought to their attention, they need to be able to immediately deal with that. And even if it means discipline, because that's the only way we're going to stop seeing some of the things that we've seen happen with so many police departments across the country.
Well, I tell you, man, you change negative behavior one bite at a time. It's how you eat an apple, one bite at a time. You don't just swallow a whole apple. You got to take it one bite at a time. And sometimes you're not going to change everything.
No,
But if you change the foundation, the policies, and the way policies are handled, and the people that you promote into these positions, and their emotional intelligence and how they hold people accountable is how you make the difference.
exactly.
That's how you start the change.
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to have that jump start, and that jump start is a consent decree.
Yeah.
Well, I just don't like the way that it's forced. The fact of the administrative part of how you pay people, and that's the problem I have with
Keith, and I think if there was something that DOJ said, hey, we're going to put you on the consent decree for, say, 4 years. And this consent decree is going to not be a burden on the taxpayers, not be a burden on the police department. Now, if you are real serious about changing this perception that this agency has, and you've got a new police chief in there who is very committed to doing that, the DOJ should step back and see how that's going to play out. Uh, because again, I think that's what Memphis is basically saying. And Seattle and other cities are saying, we've learned a lesson. We put some things in place to prevent these things from happening again. Now, if they do happen, we've got some systems in place to immediately address those issues.
This is the deal. There will always be non-effective police departments. There will always be effective police departments.
You're right.
There will never be a perfect police department.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
I'm sorry.
now, when you said there would never be a perfect police department, I'm sitting here thinking about, Mayberry, Andy Griffin. I think they.
That still wasn't perfect. That wasn't perfect police department, man. That was because you know what? Because Barney still violated every policy they had. And if you really just think about it in modern day, some of the things that Barney did violated people's civil rights.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
really think about it, man. I
yeah.
mean, you take somebody and you put them in jail, and you're thinking that you're allowing them to, you're helping them out, but you let them sleep in jail and they can't get
Well,
out.
then was
That's
well,
a
now see,
detention, man.
well,
That's a
well, now
detention.
see, Keith, they didn't put Otis in jail. Otis put himself in jail.
They allowed Otis, and Otis was being
They-
detained. You
hey,
think,
hey, they,
no, man.
Keith, they allowed Otis to walk in. The door was open. They allowed Otis to take the key, lock the door, and lay down and go to sleep and get
Yeah,
up
but
the
you know
next
what?
morning.
That was a policy violation. And then at the end of the day, I'd like to see what those policies, how big that policy book was. It's probably
Yeah.
about that big. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
what police
yeah.
department do you know that the commissioned officer don't have guns not armed?
Well, you mean
That's a violation of policy right there.
what it's like? You mean Andy? How he walked around with no weapon?
Well, he had no weapon, but Barney had one bullet, and it was in his pocket. And
Yeah,
who has a who
but
who
but but
what
but
police department? No, man, it was
but
all kind of policy violations and civil rights violations, man.
oh man,
You,
yeah.
you, you, you telling me that you didn't ever see them searching or going going to people's homes and stuff?
Well,
Come on,
well,
man.
I do remember that, and we're getting out. We're talking about the Andy Griffin show. I do remember when they went out to the still and they found that the guy was out there cooking up some whiskey or some moonshine,
Barney got
and,
drunk.
and Barney got drunk. And
That's it. That's a policy violation, man. Come
they,
on,
go,
man.
they didn't go back to get a warrant. They just
We gotta stop. Breaking down people's steals. That's a that's civil rights violation, man. That's violation. You can't do that, man. But listen.
yeah.
We got to stop comparing policing to Andy Griffith because there were some definite policy violations, man.
Well, I brought that up because again, that a TV show that had some humor to it, but at the end of the day, uh, people felt safe.
They did.
People, and I think that's to get back to what we're talking about is this policing under federal oversight. So many communities now today, Keith, who look like you and I, don't feel safe, but they want good policing. They just want good policing, but good policing comes with knowing how to treat people. Because, Keith, you would think after seeing so many incidents that we've seen that some of these cops would stop doing some of the things that they're doing, but it continues to happen. And I mean, what, 4 years, TikTok didn't even exist a couple of years ago. And now with all these videos that you continue to see on TikTok, it's just like, Mike, what is really going on with the world of policing?
Well, a breakdown, I can tell you, man, a breakdown of common sense and a breakdown of emotional intelligence.
The
And
biggest,
a breakdown,
the big word you just said is emotional intelligence.
well, Virgil, think about it. When I know this is in closing, but I want you to think about it. I want the listeners and viewers to think about this. When you put a breakdown in common sense and you put a lack of emotional intelligence and you put that in a uniform with a gun and a badge and a penal code book, that is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
That is a recipe. And you put a little bit of narcissism in it.
Yeah, well, you put a little bit, yeah, that attitude in it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that thinks that, hey,
absolutely.
I finally got what I wanted. I finally got this badge, and I finally got this gun. I finally got this authority. And they were stupid enough to hire me. So guess what? I'm gonna do what I want to do.
But in all fairness, before we close, in all fairness, in these police departments that are having these problems, you have more good police than bad ones.
You do, you do.
But that doesn't matter to the
That
communities.
that does not. And I think
That
again,
doesn't matter.
internally, but externally is what matters, Keith.
It doesn't
Hey
matter.
man, we definitely went well over our normal time as we talked about policing without federal oversight. It's been a good topic, man. And let me look in here. We got one more comment that just popped up. Let's see.
They said,
Uh,
Will said, Dr. Tharp said it's the us versus them mentality.
mentality, and that is another deep rooted cultural issue within policing.
It
Us
is.
against them. Yeah.
It is.
But yeah. Well, hey, man, we're going to get together next Thursday and do this all over again and have come up with another informative topic to talk to our listeners about. But I want to remind you, if you're a first time listener, go to our website, www.youandthelaw.com, youandthelawpodcast.com. That's www.youandthelawpodcast.com. Our website, click on our links, go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, uh, and follow us on YouTube. Go to our Facebook page, You and the Law, on our Facebook page. Like, subscribe, share with your family, your friends, and make sure that they tune in every Thursday because we're going to be talking about some real topics that matter to the community. Keith, I got to say this because we're coming up on the end of the year, man. Do you know when we go into 2025, man, we're going to be approaching 5 years of doing this, brother?
Yeah, we're not even talking about the time before when we were working with LA. They're talking about just you and I.
Just yeah. So yeah, but yeah. Hey, man, it's been a pleasure, and we'll get together again. And again, if you're out there, if you got a topic or something you want us to talk about, shoot us an email at youandthelaw2020 at gmail.com. That's youandthelaw2020 at gmail.com, or go to our website and click on those links. But we definitely love to hear from you. And Keith, man, it's been great, brother. And we'll get together again. Mr. Turtleneck.
Not, no comment, man. I appreciate
All
you,
right.
man.
All right, brother. All
This
right. Well,
is the
hey,
deal. I got a turtleneck. You got a turtle head.
whatever, dude. Hey, man, we're gonna close out. We got a good intro to close out on. But again, we want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we will see you again right here next week on You and the Law Podcast Show.